In 1946, Winston Churchill coined a phrase to describe the bond forged between London and Washington during the Second World War: the special relationship. Over the next 4 decades of the Cold War, that partnership grew into a sprawling mutual defense pact. The two nations built a highly integrated intelligence network, formalized in the Five Eyes Alliance. British outposts provided critical signals intercepts across the globe, while American infrastructure processed and analyzed the data. But a blunt policy document recently issued by the Pentagon reveals a very different modern reality. The 2026 U.S. National Defense Strategy reorders American priorities. For the first time in generations, Europe is explicitly ranked as a secondary fear. The directive states that American forces will now concentrate on homeland defense and the Indo-Pacific, demanding that allies take primary responsibility for their own security. The diplomatic poetry of a shared transatlantic brotherhood has been replaced by a conditional, interest-based framework, where American support comes with a strict, measurable price tag. To understand the immediate danger this poses to London, you have to look at the ultimate guarantor of British security, the Trident nuclear deterrent. While the UK can launch these weapons independently, the physical hardware carrying them tells a different story. The missile compartments on these Vanguard-class submarines, the missiles themselves, and the testing infrastructure are all supplied and maintained by the United States. If a highly transactional administration in Washington decides to alter a 1958 mutual defense agreement, the UK could rapidly lose access to the replacement parts and missile stockpiles required to keep its nuclear umbrella active. Decades of interlocking defense procurement have created a system where Britain's most powerful military asset operates at the complete mercy of American political goodwill. The Pentagon's strategic pivot away from Europe shifts the US military footprint heavily toward the Indo-Pacific to counter China. Meanwhile, rising economic nationalism translates into tariff walls and supply chain reshoring that isolate the US market from its European partners. Domestic political polarization means American foreign policy is increasingly subject to erratic pendulum swings. The second Trump administration demonstrated a willingness to deploy protectionist trade tools against traditional allies and issue threats to withdraw from established defense pacts entirely. The overarching approach rejects the multilateral institutions Washington itself established after World War II, replacing them with a strict policy of homeland defense first. Washington is systematically dismantling the international security architecture it built, leaving allies entirely exposed. Inside the British Armed Forces, that exposure is severe. Decades of relying on the American security umbrella fostered a dependency culture across UK military planning. You can see the constraints of this integration in conventional hardware. The UK is a Tier 1 partner on the F-35 fighter jet program, building critical components for the fleet. But that deep supply chain integration restricts the Royal Air Force's ability to operate or maintain the aircraft entirely on its own. Reversing this requires capital the UK currently lacks. The military is stretched thin and facing a sluggish economy, making it impossible to quickly construct the independent supply lines needed to replace American logistical support. This decline in independent capability and troop numbers has caught the attention of policymakers in Washington, directly eroding British credibility as a peer military partner. London is caught in a tight fiscal corner, too economically constrained to fund a fully independent military, yet too vulnerable to maintain the status quo. The response to this crisis is the 2025 Strategic Defense Review, a government overhaul initiated at 10 Downing Street. This assessment forces a sober look at Britain's true military capacity. The review mandates an end to relying on a romanticized partnership with the US, focusing instead on internal reforms to build national resilience and rapid warfighting readiness. To reach that 5% target, the UK would need to find an additional $41 billion every single year. This chart tracks the climb from the current baseline, a requirement that forces the government to choose between defense and every other domestic priority. Achieving strategic autonomy will demand a redirection of domestic resources on a scale that forces hard economic choices on the British public. To survive this structural shift without bankrupting the state, the UK is abandoning its post-Brexit ambitions of a global Britain and shrinking its geographic focus to become the primary anchor of European security. London is working to establish a new defense coalition alongside France, Germany, and the European Union, forming a stronger, highly integrated European pillar within the NATO alliance. By taking the lead on continental defense planning and reducing its reliance on Washington, the UK actually increases its geopolitical value to American defense planners who want a capable manager in the region. The alliance will survive, but the terms are now strictly transactional. Strategic interest and burden sharing have displaced the sentimentality of the previous century.
If you value evidence over tribalism, subscribe to Hard-Hitting News 365. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.